Hi.
Great.
Okay, all good, thank you.
Okay, I think that's recording.
Moment.
Great. Are we okay if we start with the questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So the first one was for Jade, and it was just about your previous experience as a dancer or performer.
I think you might have cut out a little bit. Like, do you mind repeating that question?
Yeah, sure. So it was just your previous experience as a dancer or performer, just as a bit of background about you.
Right. So I actually just recently completed my degree at the National University of Singapore. So that's actually in theater studies. And I have been working with this organization called Art This Singapore, which is Arts and Disability. And basically what we do is that we have a lot of avant-garde performances. We have extended monologues. One of my latest works is actually at the National Gallery. So that's something that I've been working on. And I think in terms of dance, I have a bit of a childhood background in like RAD dance, like ballet. So like that's something that I used to do.
It sounds like you're doing lots of interesting things. Congratulations on finishing your degree as well.
Thank you.
So just also then following on from that, how you found out about the project and what interested you in taking part?
So this project was actually brought to my attention by artists. So what happened was that they actually explained that this was a telepresence project that they were doing with the UK with CRIPtic Arts. So I was actually brought in to take a look at this project and see what I can do to help the team and everything.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'd previously made the connection with Art.dis to ask about performance. So I'd sort of made the first overture.
Okay, thank you. And had you any previous experience of rehearsing remotely or of telepresence work?
I think this has to be my first time doing something as, interesting as like telepresence, because I don't think this is something that has been done before, like, as far as I know. So the idea is of like having a virtual stage, it was completely new to me.
Right. And was there something about the telepresence that drew you to it or interested you, or was it something else about the project that kind of helped you decide to take part, or were there things that I'm just wondering if there was anything about the telepresence before you took part in the project that interested you in it?
So what I researched on telepresence was actually the idea of having a shared space across different actual spaces. So the idea of having a shared virtual space. And I thought that was really interesting because like normally in a performance, you kind of share energy with the other performer by being in the same space as them. But being as far apart as, being in Singapore, being in the UK, being 8 hours apart, I think that it's really interesting that we actually get to share that space despite that time difference and despite that complete difference in being two completely different geographical locations.
Yeah,
So
I think that's really interesting.
yeah,
as
so
well.
that was
Yeah.
that was what really piqued my interest. Steve, I wonder if your interest in this particular project.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously, kind of Paul and I have worked together a lot before. So I'm always interested in what can be done with telepresence. And I think, I think there were lots of new and interesting things that came out of this project. Yeah, definitely.
Just wondering what else I had. Did you have any before you took part in the project? any kind of hopes or expectations or concerns or questions about it?
Well, okay, if I understand like hopes and expectation correctly, I think it's really about like that kind of having as much interaction. I was very interested to find out like how much interaction is possible in a space like this. So when I was doing that project, I wondered if I think that it's a very good start, but I wondered if there is even more potential for actually more interaction and something more. So I think during that particular project, we were doing a lot of movement. So it was about that coordination with like Jamie in the center of the stage, and I am in that space. I am talking to them. Okay, not talking to them, but I am reaching out to them. And
Yeah.
so it's that idea of really moving in the space and ensuring that our movement don't overlap in an unnatural way, and so to speak. So we have to be aware of that additional element of like the mistakes that technology can cause. And at the same time, it's also about ensuring that that human connection is real. So I think that there's a lot of potential here, because I think maybe if I was speaking to Jamie, and there would be even more to explore.
Okay, so if there'd be more verbal discussion, do you think? Or if he was here now talking with us?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. I don't know, Steve, before you started the project, did you have any kind of thoughts on how it built on the previous telepresence stage, or any kind of hopes of what might come out of this particular project?
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping there would be, a kind of discernible difference, and that we could, hopefully make some breakthroughs and so on. And it was certainly a different. The project with Jayne was certainly quite different from some of the previous iterations. So, and I was struck by a really sort of interesting calmness and balance and things which we didn't see with the other theatre groups. And that sort of the way it was approached was from a calm, very centered approach that I think is in some way related to disability, that people with disabilities will find their center and understand kind of harmony in a slightly different way. So where with the theatre companies that we worked with before, there was lots of like energy and sort of and everyone's like talking at once, and it's very sort of frantic and frenetic. Whereas I think what characterized the project with Jamie was this absolute calm, this absolute sense of harmony, of taking care, of taking time, of great thoughtfulness, of a sense of, no, we need to really rehearse and know what we're doing. So it came from a different space and from a different sensibility. So that was the thing that struck me most, and that there was kind of an immediate intuition, I think, from Jamie and some of the other actors, including Jade, that okay, I am also in this space of harmony and balance and all of that. And that's one thing I thought was lovely about the scene that Jade did. I mean, at the time we thought this would be a rehearsal, yeah, but and it ended up being kind of, well, it was so good. It worked as a one-off event. I mean, with its own rehearsals, but it was just the one session. But there was there was a striking feeling of carefulness, of empathy, of timing and sensitivity.
Is that something you've noticed in previous work with disability-led organisations or disabled people or performers as well?
Yes. I mean, I mean, my experience in working with disability groups, or I work for on a long tour with Nabil Shaban, a sort of well-known disabled wheelchair actor. And again, yeah, there's a real sense of great focus, of great precision in what is done. I think. Yeah, disability performers work in a different way, and it is partly because of the the need to find their center of gravity, so to speak, in a kind of broader understanding of that.
I think I really love what Steve said about the center of gravity, and it's not just physical. I think in a way it's also emotional. So it's really that idea that we have a very different lived experience, and so our vulnerability manifests in different ways. So in performance, I think that is something that we could really elucidate. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting. It's a really important point about the specificity of this project, I think. Okay. Did you have anything further to ask Paul about any of? Do come in if there's things that I'm not covering, or where there's like follow-on questions as well.
Yeah, there is a follow-on question. Just a quick one, and it's to Jade. I wonder whether if Jade had heard about CRIPtic Arts before the project, and if you had or had not, what did you learn from CRIPtic Arts, or what were you hoping? What have you learned from them in this process? And Jamie's work in particular. I wonder whether you'd come across it.
All right. So I think before this particular project, I've heard of Disability Art Online, but not CRIPtic Art, which is like, the organization that Jamie Hill started. And I think Disability Art Online is something that they also like started alongside it. So that is, I didn't know about the connection between them at first. But then I think after finding out about CRIPtic Art, I've been following their socials and everything. And actually, I discovered that they really have a lot of artist development programs. And these are something that I would be interested in, like, in future, if I ever decide to look into the UK as, a potential collaboration or partnership. I think that is something that I would love to explore.
Well, I'd be happy to make that connection, to continue that connection and collaboration if I can. So certainly something I'd like to discuss with Jamie some more as well. I wonder whether you had, I don't know, in the particular piece that you did, there's obviously some dialogue going on, but Jamie's work was very much about a UK kind of a conversation around the healthcare, the care package that he was receiving from the health providers in the UK, and about the complexities around that and the changing landscape and how that affected him. I wonder whether you had any thoughts or comments about his poetry, really, about the way he delivered and wrote this particular piece, what that might have meant for you.
Right. So I remember that the title of this piece is actually Quality of Life is Not a Measurable Outcome. And so I think to me that particular title, it struck me quite a lot, because I think that idea of quality of life for a disabled person, what exactly is quality of life? So is it like, the ability to retrieve information as a deaf person, or is it the ability to get around, like, or is it something more? Is it something like, the emotional impact, the impact on mental health, and like the way society looks at you and the way you look at society. And I think that is the point. It feels to me that that's the point that Jamie trying to drive at, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, so I think that process of exploring that intangible human connection beyond like just the surface of what medical professionals would often put as quality of life, I think that is really important to explore.
Thank you. Yeah, really interesting. I'll hand back to Jayne.
I just mentioned another that struck me before I forget was the in that scene and in the show generally, there's kind of it was interesting how that sense of, and what Jade was talking about connection that even there is separation, there's a real sense of connecting, and it does sort of again speak to the centers of gravity, the need for individual strength and focus and determination that each person has, which is kind of, I think, is emphasized through disability and necessary. But then this wonderful kind of planets sort of circling, and this sense of a gravitational pull and a connection within the separation is again something that I found very arresting and striking about that scene.
Mm. Is there anything more about the different kinds of touch? Because obviously you were trying to create at least the illusion or sense of touching, and we're talking about kind of medical care, and there's sort of sense of like medical touch or touch by professionals and within theatre, and then there's kind of what you were trying to create in that scene. And I wonder if there was any ways that kind of spoke to the ideas of the piece.
So I wonder if, because my part
if
actually, sorry, is that okay? Okay, yeah. So I think my particular role of an allied health professional, and that's somebody who is actually personally hired by Jayne, I think Jayne the character. And then after that, so it's really that idea of that blurred line between a medical touch and a human touch. So I think the idea of a medical touch is often stereotyped to be a little bit cold and impersonal and not so human. Whereas like, that the kind of touch that we were going for, so I was actually directed to be a little bit softer, a little bit more longing, as if there is like that intangible human connection between, two people. And doing that over telepresence is really interesting because you can't actually touch the other person. So there has to be a lot of imagination involved in like the quality of the touch and ensuring that it actually presents on screen as something that is very clearly soft and gentle and delicate in a way.
Yeah, I think that did come across when I watched it, because I've only seen it on the screen, and I really felt that about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we've probably covered this. I wonder if anything that you remember that was different to what you expected, or it would be when you first kind of thought about the project or set out, anything surprising or different that happened?
I think actually I was going in with very open expectations because I had been told that telepresence is something that is completely new. It's almost experimental in a way. And so I was prepared for this to be exactly what it was told to me, an experiment. So I think I was just going in and ready to play and see what happens.
Was there anything from you, Steve, that was different or happened differently to how you expected at the start of the project?
Well, I think Jade just used the word delicacy, and I was talking a little bit about that and the care and precision, and that delicacy I think was again something that was striking, and particularly, I'm repeating myself, but going back to all the other theatre companies we're working with weren't particularly. It wasn't about delicacy. It was about ideas and yeah and rah and theatricality and all of that. So it had a more poetic quality. I also thought there's some really good visualizations in the James project overall. I particularly liked all the the doctors around him, but then they start to assume his face, which was kind of really interesting. and this kind of this doubled his sort of doubled figure, and then his use of the wheelchair and you know, particularly the wings and the sort of flying wheelchair was again particularly striking. So I think those sort of visual, you know, very striking visual elements, the kind of sense of poetics and delicacy. These again are things that were different and I didn't necessarily expect it.
Did you think the visual elements were different, or it was more visual than the previous telepresence project?
I think it was a different aesthetic and a different sensibility. You know, not that other ones weren't visual, you know, and some were very were very visual. So I'm not saying it was more visual or kind of better visually. It was just, it had a different kind of aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there sort of any way of kind of expanding on what that aesthetic was? The sort
of well, I think it was a kind of out of this world,
okay.
so, you know, or extraordinary, or kind of uncanny, and we had kind of things of sort of space and all of that, and a sense of sort of, you know, perhaps, well, of flying and all that, and a certain, I suppose, transcendent through the, you know, flying wheelchairs, etc. Kind of, you know, transcendent. Kind of feel where of sort of, I mean, not necessarily leaving your body, because I think, you know, the disabled body knows its presence and its gravity, etc. But I think in that aesthetic there was a yearning for to go off into space, and so on. So and an otherworldly sort of transcendence, not in a kind of spiritual Buddha sense, but in a kind of wider, broader metaphysical sense.
Is that connected to the fact that it was telepresence, the kind of dialogue between the telepresence and the disability, do you think? Or
yeah, I think it's double that as well, if you like. We spoke about the kind of, you know, the qualities that disabled people often have, but then the telepresence also gives another otherworldly or out of this world element. I mean, I'm not saying, you know, Jamie's project was the only one, you know, out of the, you know, the 10 we've done or whatever that did that. Others were quite otherworldly, but they may be more otherworldly in terms of they've got more of a surrealist aesthetic or something, whereas this was more sort of cosmological.
Paul, did you have something to?
I just want to jump in very quickly, and it's just on the back of what Jade has said and what Steve has said, and I just wanted to reminds me of something about Jamie that struck me about Jamie and his this piece of work, and earlier recorded versions of it. Jamie's a big fan of technology. He embraced the project because he really quite enjoys the possibilities that technology might bring him. But he also knows that technology plays a very big part in his life, his everyday life. And he embraces technology in a way that it is in a phenomenological way, as it is an extension of him. So his chair and his other apparatus. And there are scenes in his performance where that space is intruded on by not the carers that Jade played, but by other healthcare carers who are scripted to come in and quite sort of
you frozen?
Taking over with the technology. Yeah, it's like pressing buttons and touching things of his, arranging his wheelchair without really asking him or engage or thinking of them as part of him. And he plays on that quite a lot to sort of say, whoa, invasion of my space, invasion of this space. This technology is my body. And that's quite interesting what you were saying earlier on, Jade, about the difference between that interaction with him and your interaction that was very, 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 very intimate and very close and very sensitive and much more calculated and respectful. I think that was interesting. That was a really interesting point.
I think there's a conversation to be had about like, bodily autonomy of like somebody who is disabled. And I think maybe actually not just somebody who is disabled, but humans in general. So the idea of not intruding into somebody's personal space, especially if they haven't asked for it, that is often an idea that is forgotten when it comes to somebody who is disabled. So I think to me, when I experienced the scene, in the telepresence stage, I was actually thinking of something like, how is this like, human intimacy, like kind of overriding or transcending that idea of the very medical and forceful touch. So when I watched the full piece, when I saw like, the way that Jamie's body was almost manhandled by like, the other medical carers, I actually felt that there is a sense of intrusion. And so I think that sense of intrusion is often, I feel like it's a metaphor for the way society has looked at disability so far. It's that idea of like, I have to fix you medically, and not really that acceptance that but Jamie, the character, is just someone who wants to be and who wants to, like, I think, like what Steve said, like transcend and really have that a little bit more spiritual side of exploring life just as a human being and not as somebody who society sees as disabled.
Thank you. I wonder if we show the clip at this point. Would that?
Should
Right.
I do it, Jane? I'm wondering whether I should play it because I think the quality might. I'm on the campus and I think my internet connection is a little. Is that a bit better? That maybe if I play the video.
Okay, that'd be great if you could do that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no problem. Let me just get it up on the screen.
So yeah, we thought this would be a way of just kind of recalling kind of what happened, and if there are things that come up as you watch it, to kind of share those would be great, and then we'll follow on with some questions and discussion afterwards as well.
Let me just share that. I'm looking for audio. Share options, sound. Let me. I think I'm sharing sound as well. I hope so. Let's have a look.
Every day, my carers take my body. They hold it. They're holding me, my peaceful, motionless self. Is that not enough for them? I learned to live like this. I turned grief into motion, and I built myself a life. Thanks to my carers, wiping my ass without scrubbing away my dignity, dressing, undressing, lifting, turning. So now, I will assert my place, because they don't get to make my body into my definition.
There we go.
Is there anything, just seeing that you wanted to comment on immediately, or I've got some further questions?
Maybe I would talk about like, the way I felt when like, I was actually creating that work, like in that kind of space, with the screen behind me and looking at the screen in front. So there's actually that sense of, I think there's that sense of total imagination when you are in that space and you really have to rely on that small little screen in front of you to see if that touch is happening the right way. But then after that, I feel that it is after that connection has been made and then that very real moment when both Jamie and I realized that, it's actually, we have actually established that connection. And then there is that very real emotion that materializes between the both of us. So I think that is something that I realized when I was rewatching it again. That was actually what I felt back then.
Yeah, I've only seen kind of all I've seen of that performance is that clip of the video that we've seen. So I think you talked about the green screen. I'm just wondering if you could just describe the space you were performing in and how you navigated Jamie, because he obviously wasn't in the room with you. So I'm just wondering what was in the room. And
so it was really an empty room. It was a room with like a green screen at the back. I think it stretches all the way to the ground and everything, right? And it's kind of like a curve, like so it's from up here and after it stretches into the ground like this. Yeah. And so I was like, basically moving along this wall and the camera is here. So we've got so it's really just me and like that little screen in front of me and trying to figure out where I am in the space together with the actor. And at the same time, this is a real scene for us. So I have to basically align myself to ensure that there is somebody, a wheelchair user in front of me. And then after that, based on that screen, based on where Jamie is, I figure out where my eyes should be and everything. So it's about establishing that connection with someone really real in front of me. I think I would compare this experience to kind of when I'm auditioning and I'm having a monologue, and then after that I have to actually imagine that there is a target and a real person in front of me, and I'm communicating with them. So it's that idea of like really knowing that there is somebody who is in the space with me, but then at the same time, I have to imagine them in a new space, which is really interesting.
Yeah. So you had to look at the screen, the monitor, to work and then interpret that to work out where Jamie was.
Right. Yes. And that is, I think that it's very difficult to have an exact match of like, where the performer is versus like, where exactly. So for example, that part where I think Jamie's hand and mine touch, we actually really had to, Jamie was extending his hand, but then I think at some point, I think Jamie is only Jamie is able to extend his hand up to a certain height. So I would look at the screen, and then after that I would do my best to match that particular height and like that to ensure that there is actually a touch, a contact going on.
And did you know you'd touched his hand or the hand when you went at that point, or did you just have to trust that it had happened? Did you look at the screen and see it, or?
I would be mentally calculating the distance. So when we're almost touching, I would turn to him and actually establish that emotional connection. So it's at first, of course, there's like that calculated, okay, where is his hand? But then after that, eventually it's just about, okay, I'm going to trust that his hand is around that place. And then after that, everything else is between me and that imaginary space. So because the second I turn away from the screen, the second I look to that empty space in front of me, that's Jamie. And that's where I have.
And did you imagine him in that space, or did you when you were there, did you sort of feel
Jayne,
like he was there, or did you?
Sorry, the beginning of your question, you broke up, so maybe just repeat that. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'm just wondering about kind of that kind of imaginary person in the space and how real they felt, or kind of what you sort of imagined in front. Did you kind of actually imagine Jamie, and did they feel real in front of you, or? how real did they feel in that moment?
How real an imaginary person feels to me is it really depends on the amount of detail and the amount of focus I put into that moment. So if I am fully focused on what I am doing to interact with them, it's almost like I can imagine their reaction. And so in acting, we're always what we say acting and reacting to that person in the moment. So it's like I'm looking to this imaginary space with somebody there, and then after that, I'm smiling at them. I picture them smiling back at me, and it's that idea that, okay, we have established something here, and then after that, we continue to have that little, I think it's a feedback cycle in a way. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just looking because we haven't followed the. So I'm just seeing if there's. Was there anything else that kind of supported the performance, or what did you need to support that performance?
As in accessibility needs?
Not necessarily. Also, well, I guess accessibility in the broadest sense with the telepresence as well.
I mean, one thing was that I was giving cues.
Yeah.
Because Jade is hard of hearing. So and she was sometimes not looking at the screen, so that it worked better, and the connection was better between Jayne and her. So, but and because she can't hear that or clearly hear Jamie's dialogue, we decided that I would do some cues. I would be in a position where she could see me, and I would cue for to her to start walking in one direction, and then cue her to do various things. So I suppose that was one practical sort of aid, because of being hard of hearing. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that worked artistically in a way. So Steve is like a third off-screen performer in a way. So he's like signaling to me, and then after that I would actually make my move. So it's almost like there is an intermediary of that communication. Yeah, I feel that that is actually quite interesting, because it's almost as if you're a performer with me, except that the camera is perhaps not focused on you. Yeah.
I wonder if it's sort of a director role as well, perhaps, because it's a performance taking place in different physical spaces. If that role in theatre is also dispersed in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were several directors, if you like. I mean, I was doing a sort of assistant director cue. It's very simple. I wouldn't call it major direction. It's quite it's functional. But obviously, kind of Jamie was also directing. Paul is also directing from a technical viewpoint, and so on. So there are several directors, and I think with the telepresence stage, that is another thing, because you're kind of self-directed, but then also you're very reliant on the sort of conceptual directors or the technical directors to make it all come together. I've got one more observation when I watched the scene again, and I think and maybe this was also because it's kind of like, well, it needs a lot of rehearsing, and it needs precise timing, and it needs the right eye lines and all that. And I think all that worked really, really well, and the touches and everything, which was spot on. But I think because of the technical demands of it, and because having to work in a kind of a sort of strange way, a sort of, like I say, separate but seeking connection. That actually it had a really interesting tension. Okay, that's not to say it was kind of not confident, but a tension that is partly because these people are separated by thousands of miles, but actually they need an emotional intimacy and a physical intimacy to make the scene work. So that think set up a really nice tension. And I think audiences who know, kind of this is telepresence, find there's a really kind of, oh, will they get that touch right? And oh yeah, and the tension is kind of relieved, and there is a wonderful pleasure principle that comes about when, yes, they are connecting, they are looking at each other, they are touching. So there is a real pleasure principle to telematic theatre, multimedia theatre, that audiences really kind of respect, and so I'll repeat myself on this thing of, it is very, very pleasurable to see it work, because it's sort of we know how difficult it is. We know there is a tension there, but there was also a kind of lovely slowness part, and James deliberately speaking slowly, and then Jade, because of that and so on, is walking slowly, because she's just got one sort of perambulation and so on. So so it's kind of, I think it's really interesting how these things kind of work out, and how the experience for the performer and the audience can be quite similar in terms of wanting to make the right connection, to make it work.
Yeah. One thing I was really struck by watching it that time was the kind of almost like isolation, or the very minimal background that there's this stage background that's just black with the smoke, and there's only you and Jamie in that space, Jade. But I guess when you were actually in the space, went to where the rehearsal with Jamie took place on one of the days, and there's lots of other things around. There's lots of equipment, the screens, people, but in what we see is something that just isolates and highlights you and Jamie. I don't know what my question is, but I think it's just something about the difference between maybe what we might see and what was actually in those spaces, and if it felt like it does when we see it on the screen where with just you and Jamie, or if it felt like there was a lot of other things around it.
So when I first saw this space on that small little screen with Jamie in it, my immediate thought was that this actually looked like but like the inside of somebody's mind. Like, it's a dark space, it's full of fog and everything, and then you've got two humans in the middle of it. So I think it's that idea of that, like, actually having two humans in like this very dark, mysterious, shrouded space, and then really establishing that human contact in it. Like, it's like Jamie and I are the only really lit up figures. So like, it's almost like we are the particles of light in this very dark space, and then after that there's that contact. So I think I really love that kind of metaphor that the visuals actually created.
Paul, did you?
Sorry.
Yep, sorry about that. I just want to add to that, or just to remind us, and perhaps Jade can just to talk about it a bit more. But one of that particular scene, it looked quite simple, but actually there was a lot going on that was quite complex and things we hadn't tried before, because Jade walks in from stage right, and then stands, and then walks to the front of the stage, and then walks just towards stage left, and then actually walks back towards the back of the stage and walks behind Jamie. And actually doing that, we had to cut. You can't see it; they're invisible cuts in the kind of switching of the videos. We're putting Jade in the front, and then when Jade goes to the left, we then put Jade behind. So Jade has that opportunity then to have a sense of three-dimensional space, that actually there is and Jade is walking down towards us, and then is walking back away from us. So there is a kind of real use of the perspective. There's a use of layering, and I think I remember watching all the sorts of trying the scene out. I could see Jade learning this movement, this motion, I don't know if you remember that, Jade. Can you talk a little bit about how you discovered that and how that felt when you sort of got that a little bit more? Yeah, now I've got this right. I know where to go and that sort of thing.
I've got to give Steve a lot of credit for this because really, like, in that space, Steve was really the one, like, telling me to, okay, maybe we could go in a semicircle, and then after that, like, back. And then I think because there is that moment where they actually need to do that little invisible cut, that little switch. And so actually that moment I kind of would hold my movement, like, ensure that there's a little bit of a tension moment before I continue in that slow balletic walk behind Jayne. So, like, there's a lot of movement direction happening, even though yes, it looks like a really simple scene, but at the same time, I think artistically, technically, there's a lot going on. Yeah.
So Steve being there was like another monitor in many ways for you. I mean, as a kind of an additional prompt, really, to sort of say, I guess, because. So that's yeah, but I think you looking at Jamie as well whilst you did it, you kept that center point. You could focus on Jamie being the point of focus, which really comes across that small clip.
Yeah, which is quite difficult because there's nothing there, and it's remembering and all that. But work well. I also like the airy quality. It's quite airy. If you're thinking elements, it wasn't earthbound. It was very kind of, again, this sort of bit earthly quality. But that maybe it's like airy quality.
Yeah, so for me, it was really about, like, taking that kind of quality back into my body. It's very balletic in a way. Yeah.
I think we've probably covered a lot of the questions other than kind of the broader questions, but I don't know if there's anything specifically about the performance before or anything else you had, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, just an observation, and maybe just be useful to hear. And I really enjoyed this continuing from that conversation. But I just wanted to say, in some ways, what that everybody has to learn how to use this system. I've seen, with Steve and I have worked with performers in the previous project, and they're also learning in very, very much the same way. So we're all in a sense of having to. Sorry, there's a police station right behind our building, so we're always getting police cars coming past the window here. We're not in a high crime spot. It's just the locality of the police station. Anyway, it's so really, it's what I wanted to say. It was something about everyone has to learn, and in a way, it's rather like the kind of lots of phenomenologists talk about the extension of the body and the idea of the blind person and the stick being the extension of the hand, and people talk about we can all close our eyes and hold a pen and touch things, and we can feel surfaces through something we touch, and we all have that ability to learn that ability, and that's something you have to learn to do that and get better at it. And this is another way that everyone has to learn to get better at it. So it is a kind of, I hope in some ways, a kind of level playing field for everyone to explore and to embrace that, from everyone that takes part in it.
I think I feel quite inspired by what you just said. Like, when I was doing that project, it was completely new to me as well. And so I think discovering that new kind of physicality and physics of, like, working in that space is really interesting. Like, it's about discovering that, everything has a quality of movement to it. So even that moving through space, how do I imagine this as a new as myself pushing through the air to move from one place to another to ensure that there is, like, that kind of continuity in the movement. And I think having that central focus on Jamie in the middle of the space is about assigning something that is solid to a place where there's only air and imagination. So I think that's what I mean when I talk about the physics of it.
Is there, if you did it again, is there anything that you'd do differently or that you would have liked to have been done differently or changed?
I would lean even more into the physics of it because I think that there is so much to explore, like the air that I'm moving through, that's also something that I can use. So it's about exploring that quality. So when I'm moving, I would love to make it even more flow, even better from moment to moment. And perhaps I would even want to use the screen as something that I could connect with. So that idea of looking out toward the screen and then looking back into Jayne is that I think there would be so much to explore, that transition from looking at the screen, making sure that I'm in the right position, and then I said coming back to Jayne. That would be like, really interesting to look at.
Mm. Do you think it sort of enhances the creative practice and could do even further?
So I think that perhaps it enhances the creative practice in the sense that when there are suddenly so many new factors that we have to take in, suddenly we become really creative about the way we do things. And perhaps that kind of knowledge is really important in perhaps bringing it to another practice, say conventional theater. So I think that it does inspire a new way of doing things that I wouldn't have thought of before.
And do you think that can go back into theatre that isn't telepresenting anyway? You sort of said it.
Not right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one interesting thing about the sort of telepresence stage project is also because you're kind of working hard to set up the illusion, and because these things are quite sort of difficult and it takes so much imagination, it gives a kind of added tension and depth to things. And it's quite interesting. Stanislavski, in one of his books, I think An Actor Prepares or Building a Character, talks about problems. And he recommends that actors, and when I was teaching acting, I always said, have problems. So, kind of, he'd literally say, okay, so you're just a waiter in a scene. Okay, you've got a tiny part. You just come in and say, oh, here's your suit, madam, or whatever. But then it says, give yourself problems. So kind of think, worry about, a potential disease that you've got because you're going to the doctor tomorrow and you haven't been well. And this is a real problem. And then also think, maybe, the woman I'm serving to could be the next love of my life. Give yourself these problems and how all these things are going on inside you make you more dynamic, more believable, more authentic, because we're all doing it all the time. That's psychology. Rather than going in and saying, here's your suit, madam. It's like, hey, I'm worried and she's beautiful and here's your suit, madam. And it's much more interesting.
Yeah.
So kind of years ago, how to think. But I think the idea of problems, that you are overcoming problems, does add depth, authenticity, interest to the performance.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess just finally, like where next, or what potential or possibilities kind of taking this forward do you see?
I mean, or in terms of if you were to do it again, would you do how might you use it, or how might you think about going forward?
Now, I think telepresence is something that is really it's really useful for some for Jayne who might find it really expensive or difficult to travel. And then after that, it really allows for that kind of collaboration with international performers like myself with Jayne in the UK. And then after that, it allows us to collaborate in ways that wouldn't have been possible in the past. And that kind of being in the same virtual space, it crosses the boundaries of what we normally would consider live performance. And it's almost as if we've broken, now we're in the same time, we're in the same virtual space. So does this make it live theater in a way? Like, if an audience is watching this performance live, does this become live theater? So I think that this is a very interesting question that telepresence has now posed to us, and I think there's a lot of research on, there's a lot to explore further as we practice, and eventually I think it could really become a very valid mode of performance.
I'll
Thank
just
you.
add to that, if I can, just to sort of finish
Yes.
up, maybe that I think one of the things that Jamie really wanted to try and do, and they couldn't quite do it, and for lots of reasons, but it's still their aim, I think, is to really create theatre that is post-COVID, post-lockdown, that actually is in theatre, but is also online, but is not necessarily just a televised version of what's on the theatre, but is another kind of experience or involvement of audience and manifestation of the liveness in lots of different ways. And I think that's what they're really still trying to find, how to make these performances and experiences that are different from different angles and different positions online and to participate in it. So even Jamie talked about there are times when he might have to go into a hospital, or is other things he can't make the performance. What could he do instead? How can he take part that he doesn't have to go into the theatre and that sort of thing too. So trying to sort of find solutions to lots of potential problems and also broadening the audience is really interesting.
Yeah.
Back to you, Jane.
I think that's sort of answered all my questions. It's it's been really, really interesting to hear more. I was really, when I saw that piece, that part of the piece, found it really moving, and the connection and the point of connection, I could really feel that. So I was really interested to talk to you about it. It's been great to hear more about that. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else anyone wants to add, or that's...
I've got to go and get to a sort of a. Well, I'll leave you. Have any other time. Oh, that's fine.
We'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Jade.
Yeah.
Really great.
Yeah, thank
Lovely to hear this response.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Right. Thank you so much. And we will definitely keep in contact. Absolutely. Definitely. Thank you so much again.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the great questions, Jane. Thanks for prepping us with them. They're very helpful.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Okay. See you soon.
All right.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.